I want to talk to you about the potential for chaos in the spiritual community and show you how you can avoid that experience. Hi, I'm Saratoga Ocean, and I help people to spiritually awaken so they can enter a conscious path of ascension. Now, I think it's obvious that our world is moving into a greater state of more chaos, more confusion, and more division. So I think it's important that we preserve our sanity, our centeredness, and our love in the spiritual community so that we don't get influenced or overly affected by all of the chaos and division that seems to be spreading throughout the world at this particular point in time. Now, I think one of the first things that we need to do is to acknowledge that most of us have probably been traumatized due to all the events that unfolded in 2020 and are continuing to unfold into 2021. See, when you get overloaded with too much trauma, it can make you very reactive without you even realizing it. Now, the funny thing is that we probably don't even realize how traumatized we are because it's literally happened to everyone on the planet. See, the thing is, when everyone has been through this kind of trauma, you actually can reach a point where you don't even see it because you have nothing like normal to contrast it with. And so everybody's sort of on the same plane. And it's very easy to not even recognize that experience within yourself. But see, there's no way that you can initiate a planet-wide campaign of overnight destruction, lockdown, and fear without traumatizing the entire population of planet Earth. So we might all be suffering from PTSD and we don't even know it. Actually, I think maybe we should change the meaning of that from post-traumatic stress disorder to maybe perpetual traumatic stress disorder. See, we never really get to the post part of that because every shocking thing that happens seems to be followed by another shocking thing. Now, here's the problem with that. You see, when you get to this level of trauma, people become even more controllable and even more reactive out of fear and an inability to process everything that's happening. So with that said, let's pause for a moment and get centered so we can talk about the subject of how all of this could be affecting our experience of spirituality in the spiritual community. Let's just kind of reset for a moment and go back to the basics and say, why is it that we human beings seek spirituality in our lives? Because we kind of have to go back to the beginning so that we can really reset, get clarity, and get centered. We seek spirituality so we can have an anchor of clarity, certainty, peace, and love in our lives. And millions of us are currently seeking it as a way to evolve our consciousness and ascend. We know that the physical world is far too volatile, so we naturally look for something that is benevolent, positive, and loving that we can rely on, and something that can provide us with a higher source of wisdom, something that is above and beyond the fray. So spirituality, as it manifests on Earth, is supposed to frame our experience on Earth in a way that makes sense on a higher level. It's supposed to provide us with a viable path to ascend to a higher level of consciousness. And it's also supposed to bring order into our lives in this highly unpredictable world. Now, the old world spirituality continues to present itself to us in the form of churches, bureaucracies, and old dogma derived from ancient texts. And what I like to call the New World spirituality, what is also sometimes referred to as the New Age, comes to us in a much more free-flowing, creative kind of format. In the New World spirituality, you don't need a church and you don't need a bureaucracy. Anyone can engage in this form of spirituality, and you can even mix different forms together if you want to. And I think that's a really good thing because you can literally design your own spiritual practices in a way that works specifically for you. Now, if we had the relaxed freedom that we used to have, and if we could just be left alone by the media and by politics, things would probably much more easily sort themselves out naturally. But I don't think that's going to happen anymore due to the current situation of mass control and insanity that's unfolding on this planet. So here's what I want to help you guys with today. I want to help you preserve a feeling of sanity and clarity in your spiritual life so you don't let the world's chaos bleed into that area of your consciousness. So this means we need to talk about just a few more things. A lot of the spiritual teachings that you probably heard and adhered to were probably offered to you in a climate of relative freedom, peace, and prosperity. They were probably offered to you when the world was seemingly normal and things were fairly predictable. So it was easy to put your spiritual life in a category over here when your regular life over here was relatively stable and reliable. You could entertain all kinds of spiritual beliefs because it didn't necessarily have to correspond with what you were experiencing in the physical world. The wonders of those spiritual beliefs could be projected into the future because you didn't necessarily need for them to manifest in the current moment. See, our comfort zones were well intact, and we were probably collectively not all that interested in leaving those comfort zones. So spirituality could be seen as more of an add-on instead of acting as a powerful transmutational force. But in 2020, most or all of our comfort zones were basically ripped away from us and essentially destroyed. And now it looks like 2021 could prove to be an even greater continuation of that process. So the tidal wave of chaos that is enveloping this planet is very likely to start bleeding into the spiritual world and into our spiritual communities. I mean, we've seen this happen to religions for centuries. Historically, all religions have found themselves in phases of cultural upheaval, war, and corruption. The thing that I always find strange about religions is that they don't really seem to care. They just seem to continue on with the same old ancient dogmas, even if those dogmas make no sense at all. Now, I think what has allowed the old world religions to sustain themselves historically through periods of chaos and upheaval is the fact that they are so deeply entrenched in churches and in their bureaucracies. So that has served as a stabilizing force to keep them around. But we don't have anything like that in our New World spiritual communities. And I'm not saying that we should, but we should also be mindful of the fact that there's nothing inherent within our creative spiritual communities to really stabilize them when we are in such a state of massive planetary upheaval like we are right now. Which is why I think there's a potential for some of it to start breaking apart, or at the very least start to become very confusing. So if you want to continue having a reasonably decent spiritual life that supports your ascension, here's what you need to do right now. Realize that some of the spiritual teachings that you've heard about could possibly start to feel like they are failing you. And if they feel that way, it's probably because you may feel that they are not able to adequately address the unfolding situation on this planet. But here's the thing you want to be aware of. Because people are already traumatized and very reactive, they could have a tendency to start pointing fingers at each other and at their spiritual teachers and accuse them of being wrong. In fact, we're already starting to see some of this happening. Now, let me share with you a very interesting reason as to why people, when they feel traumatized, when they feel fearful, when they feel uncertain, one of the reasons that they tend to start pointing fingers and accusing other people of whatever they feel about those people is wrong. When people become very afraid and they feel like things are collapsing everywhere, they will desperately try to seek some feeling of certainty in order to feel like they can survive it. And oftentimes, the desire to seek that feeling of certainty can manifest in negative reactive ways. See, that primordial need to feel certain, it's really a survival need. It's a need to feel like something is right in my world. So if a person loses that feeling and they start feeling kind of emotionally desperate about it, they might try to create that feeling of certainty in themselves by making someone else wrong so they can, in opposition, feel that they are right. So pointing fingers and making other people wrong is often a manifestation of a very desperate attempt to gain a feeling of certainty and stability in your own life. It's actually a fear-based reaction. I mean, you can kind of sense the energy of how that works if you think about it. Like if you can say to somebody, you are wrong. There's like you get your feet planted on the ground. You are wrong. You see how that can kind of create the illusion of stability and certainty, because now if that person's wrong, then you must be right. Then you have the feeling that there's something right in your world. You feel a little more certainty. You feel a little more stable. I mean, guys, this is not a solution, but this is what people will often do in times as desperate as the ones we are in right now. So when this starts happening in spiritual communities, or if it starts happening there, it can start to lead to a certain amount of spiritual chaos. And then people start getting really confused. They might start feeling like, gee, I feel like I've been lied to, or I've been betrayed, or my spiritual teachers are failing me. And then they might desperately try to be grabbing at straws or looking for excuses for that. Sometimes you might erroneously say, well, that person must be infiltrated by dark forces because what they're saying isn't working in my life anymore, or what they're saying doesn't agree with what so-and-so over here is saying. So you see how this can really start to devolve into real mass confusion? If you start seeing things like this, or you start experiencing things like this, I'm going to show you what to do to not in any way subject yourself to this kind of chaos and stay centered and peaceful and clear and certain in ways that are positive and support your ascension. The best thing you can do is to reposition yourself and how you approach your spiritual teachers or any spiritual communities that you are in the middle of. The first thing you want to do is not blame your spiritual teachers if you feel that what they're saying to you isn't really working for you. I mean, just like in everything else in life, there are good teachers and there are not so good teachers, and there are even maybe bad teachers. So if you come to a point where you feel like, I'm wondering if I made a mistake and really maybe I chose the wrong person to listen to or something like that, don't be afraid to just own that and take responsibility for just making a choice that maybe wasn't the best one for you. Just see it as part of your learning and evolving process. See, you guys have to understand, maybe you already understand this, but in case you don't, your spiritual teachers are not there to save you. They are not deemed by some higher authority to have all the answers. And I say thank goodness for that, because we've seen how that works out with religions, right? So the first thing is to realize that spiritual teachers are not here to save you, number one, and number two, it's your responsibility to know who you need to listen to and when you need to listen to them in terms of what is best for you. It's your responsibility. See, the problem is that we're not taught to look first to our hearts for the divine wisdom that we need. Instead, like everything else in life, we tend to rely on outside authorities and social movements to decide everything for us instead of learning the fine art of discernment. So here's what you want to be careful of. Notice this tendency that many people have. If you hear a whole bunch of spiritual teachers saying the same thing, you might say to yourself, aha, that must be right, or everybody wouldn't be saying it. And then you might start looking at all of these other people and see if they're saying the same things so that you can decide if they are right as well. Guys, that's not discernment. That's kind of like being in middle school and deciding to wear the same outfit as other kids because everybody else is wearing it. So because everybody else is wearing it, you might say to yourself, well, it must be the right thing to wear or everybody wouldn't be doing it. See, the problem with this, you guys, is that it creates a situation where people get locked into a popular trend of thought and then become unable to pivot and address unexpected things that might be happening right now. And it's also, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really think it's good for spiritual teachers either, because if everybody's looking at things this way, what they're actually doing is they're putting pressure on their own teachers to keep saying the same things so that everybody can be right, even if it's not necessarily working anymore. And then you actually start to suppress everyone's ability to evolve. So then you run the risk of everybody getting stuck because everybody's so worried about losing credibility. If they pivot and shift and evolve and become much more responsive to the massive unfolding of our ascension journey, much of which, you guys, is really unpredictable. So the way you want to position yourself to keep your sanity in all of this is to understand that you are fundamentally responsible for your own spiritual life. And this is really a very necessary first step if you want to be able to continue to evolve powerfully and be able to be responsive in a positive way to the unfolding events of our ascension journey. It is a total waste of energy to start pointing fingers, accusing people of being wrong, and things like that. Because all that's going to do is leave you completely overwrought with feelings of anxiety. So here is what you can do instead that is so much better. And to be perfectly honest, this is really what we should all have been doing all along. Now, there are many sincere and wonderful teachers out there. They all have different approaches and different things to say depending on who they are and on what their mission is. Some of it's going to work for you and some of it isn't. Some of it could be awesome and wonderful, and maybe some of it could be questionable. And see, you are going to have different needs at different times in your own personal evolution. Some days you might just need the peaceful energy of an angelic reader. Other days you might need a motivational push from someone focused on personal growth and manifestation. And other times you might want to explore ideas about the wider universe and about ascension. And there is always somebody talking about any or all of these things. It's up to you to decide who you need to listen to at any particular point in time. You don't have to rigidly follow one person or adhere to something just because everyone else is. And this way you can start to take full responsibility for your own spiritual experience. This is how you keep peace in your consciousness. See, you cannot afford to be a spiritual sheep following everyone else any more than you can afford to be a societal sheep. You cannot afford to follow the crowd from one spiritual belief to another just because everybody else is doing it. See, some of those beliefs might start hitting some brick walls. Some of those beliefs could start falling apart as we move more rapidly into the future. And if that happens, people are going to start freaking out, pointing fingers, and arguing about all of it, just like they're arguing about politics. So I'm trying to show you guys how you can build your own kind of like a spiritual Noah's Ark for yourself and avoid any potential chaos that might ensue. This is kind of like designing a sacred spiritual ark just for you that is perfect because you made it. One that serves as a sanctuary of peace and keeps you above the fray. It's kind of like that story of Noah's Ark where Noah was instructed to build the ark before the flood came. I am suggesting that you build your own private spiritual ark in your heart and in your life before a potential flood of mass confusion maybe starts hitting the spiritual community. And don't fall prey to pointing fingers and arguing with people about which beliefs are right and which beliefs are wrong, because all that does is take you away from yourself. Instead, You can take advantage of all the spiritual options that are out there and choose what works for you when it works for you. It's time to build a spiritual fortress inside yourself. Let your heart serve as your guide and as your ultimate authority in these matters. And here's one more seriously important thing that I want you guys to be aware of. It's really easy to fall into the trap of thinking that what you need is more information. And believe me, there is plenty of information out there. But the only problem with this is if you think your whole answer lies in getting more information, you can end up with a mountain of information, much of which might conflict. And then you've got to figure out how to piece all of that together and make sense out of it all. You can have a tremendous amount of difficulty processing all that information, making it all work, and it can be incredibly frustrating. See, the belief that you just need to get more and more and more information because you're still not sure, you're still not certain what's happening, so just give me more information, more information. All of that comes from a belief that ascension happens out here. The truth is, ascension actually happens within you. Your universe of ascension is in here. It's not out there. See, another word for ascension is evolution. I actually like the word evolution even more because I think it's a little more direct and much more to the point. And here's something else that you probably should know. Your ascension does not depend on all the other people who refuse to wake up. I mean, that really wouldn't make any sense, and it wouldn't be very fair either, would it? But here's the thing you need to be careful of. If you align your consciousness with those people who don't want to wake up, if you worry too much about fitting in with them, then you're kind of setting an intention to align with them in order to fit in with them. You're kind of trying to have it both ways. And in that case, sure, they can impede your ascension, but it's not them who's impeding your ascension. It would be you who is wanting to align with them who don't want to wake up that would be actually impeding your own ascension. So if you want to keep this all very, very simple, just understand that your ascension refers to your evolution as a being in this universe. It happens within and is sourced within the universe that resides inside of you. Doesn't that sound so much better? And then when you understand that, you can then look at all of the information that's available out here, and you can just pick and choose what you feel works for you. You don't have to get into worrying about who's right and who's wrong and what's everybody else doing and all that kind of stuff. You can just seek what makes sense for you as an individual sovereign being. You don't have to follow the crowd. You don't have to believe things just because everyone else does. If you take this approach, it will empower you. It will free you from a lot of unnecessary chaos, stress, and spiritual anxiety. It will help you to stay calm and centered and to focus on what really matters to you. And honestly, you guys, it's really this simple. What really matters is something that you get to decide for yourself. So this is how you stay above the fray, you stay centered within, you remain the ultimate authority and in your sovereignty in your own life, and then you can calmly see what's available out here in terms of teachers and ideas and thoughts and information and messaging, and you can just see what resonates for you. You can see what matters to you. You can see what makes sense to you. And that way you maintain your heart and your inner wisdom as your final and ultimate guide. And honestly, that is the best guide of all, you guys, because your heart is the thing that is directly connected to source, directly connected to that which creates everything. I mean, what higher authority could there be? You already exist in resonance with the ultimate creative power that manifests the entire universe, you included. So wouldn't you think it'd be best to start there, to start in a centered place in resonance with that source? that you are an extension of, and then from there you can have clarity and you can take advantage of whoever's out there that is presenting something that is going to support you and enhance your ascension and your awakening journey. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if so, please give it a thumbs up and share it out with anyone else who you think would benefit from this information. And be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I am here every Sunday, Tuesday, and Friday with all new videos. And with that, I'm sending you so much love, light, and positive energy, and I so look forward to seeing you in the next video. Namaste.